Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
I mentioned at the end of last week's episode that I was going to spend the next few episodes on the subject of personnel, staff, your team. Well, we have quite a few coming for you. The plan right now is at least 4 episodes to be exact. For this week's episode, we're going to get into the subject of staff training a little bit. And then we have a 3-episode series coming on the hiring process. Then we may take a little break from the personnel subject and hit on a few other things before we come back with more on training and onboarding. So we know that staff is a big issue, and this needs no explanation. But let's say you found a good candidate, and now you need to get them up and running and productive. Well, now we're in the realm of training. And the funny thing about this that I realized many, many years ago as an executive, that one of my primary jobs, beyond making sure that the team delivered the goods, so to speak, was that of being, for lack of a better word, a teacher. If I have a team member that's supposed to fill a specific function, whatever that may be, we'll assume that I know how to do that function, and if I don't, I'd better learn. Well, part of my job is to be able to get them to do it, so that I don't have to. That's the ideal, right? I'm doing my own, scheduling, and I train someone to do the schedule, right? Then I don't have to do it, and that's the stuff of which expansion is made. And honestly, one of the most rewarding aspects of my job has not been the growth or the expansion of the company or the companies that I've run. It's actually watching a team member that I've been able to help grow on their position through training, become more competent, confident, and now is happier and having a better life. That's what makes it fun, watching someone move up from within the organization who maybe started on an entry-level position. So it's with that in mind that I wanted to cover what I consider to be 5 of the biggest training mistakes when training an employee. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And one of the first thing we tell clients, not really early on in their program, but if they're doing executive training, especially with the staff seminars and things like this, one of the first things we tell them is great staff aren't hired, they're made. So, if you find a good candidate, and this is part of the problem, you're looking for that perfect person that's going to come in and be able to do everything. Well, that really, I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. There's, unicorns out there all the time. Well, that's why they're called unicorns. They're not out there all the time. There's always unicorns. But there's great candidates out there, but having somebody come in ready-made, able to do everything with little to no instruction is extraordinarily rare. So you're going to start with a good candidate, and then you have to turn that person into the ideal employee. And it's funny, I found at times, let's say you have somebody that's working for you, and you find you're getting upset about something, they didn't do something they were supposed to do, or they did it wrong. 9 times out of 10, and I'm actually going to go further, I'm going to say 99 times out of 100, it's not because they didn't care about their job or their responsibility was bad or they intended to screw up. In a lot of cases, they just ran into something they didn't understand, or maybe what they didn't do, they didn't realize the importance of. And in my mind, that all comes back to training. So it's funny, but I found it more rewarding if I have an area that's not functioning or someone's not performing. Usually what I do is I go sit down with the person and go, what happened? And it doesn't mean that I won't get upset if someone intentionally screws something up, obviously, but usually I'll sit down with a person, something goes wrong, what happened? And you kind of walk through the process and you'll find they hit an area they just didn't know how to think with, or they had difficulty with, or something else was going on. And I'm not trying to excuse non-performance. That's not my point. But my point is, in a lot of cases, it wasn't born out of malice. It was born out of just they didn't know. And then you can walk them through it, and then in a lot of cases, you'll find that mistake just doesn't happen again. And you have to sort of walk in with that assumption. If you hire somebody and they're a good candidate, they want to do a good job. Most people really do want do a good job. They want to be, not just out of the desire for personal recognition, but most people are pretty cool and they just want to do a good job, and they want a place they can stick with and, in a lot of cases, hopefully find a career. So if you go with that assumption that most of the people you're hiring want to do a good job, and you keep on training them to do a better and better job, not letting them get away with screwing up or goofing off or whatever, you'll end up with a pretty decent team after a time. So let's say you start with a new employee before I get into these mistakes. It doesn't matter the position. Where would you start? Well, let's say you got somebody, you've hired somebody, some administrative staff. Obviously, this wouldn't apply to a provider or a dental assistant. Let's say they have zero dental experience, right? I hired somebody, I'm hiring them for the front desk. They have no dental experience. What do I do with this person? Well, the first thing I'd want to make sure of is that they learn they're in a profession with a completely new terminology. Dental terminology is not common. It's not something that everybody knows. So they're not going to understand what tooth surfaces are, what different instruments are, and different procedures are. So you have to have some form of a dental dictionary of some kind. I can give you we have one that we give to clients. I'll put it as a download on the episode webpage, and it defines most basic dental terms, as well as primarily terms that would be used in a dental practice, including some insurance terms. Because these terms are going to be being thrown around all the time. And I don't know if you've ever talked to like a software developer, as an example, and you don't know about software development, and they start throwing out terms to you, and you just sort of, what is going on? I talked about this in the episode Barriers to Study, episode 174, I believe it was. Actually, no, it was episode 172, the Barriers to Study, like what happens. So you don't want to have a situation where a person's listening to all these people talk, and they hear about an EOB, and they hear about the buccal surface of a tooth, and take two PAs, and they have no idea what's going on. So you want to make sure if they have zero experience that you at least get them someone indoctrinated with dental terminology. An important part of that, though, and I'm going to get into this as one of these big mistakes, is you don't want to just give them the dental dictionary and go read this, because then they're not connecting it with real life things. If they define what an implant is, you should show them a model of an implant or what an actual implant is, or they don't know what's a crown. Maybe they've never had a crown done. They read what a crown is, but then they should go to the lab and take a look at, maybe you have some old lab cases that you never delivered with a crown on it, and they can see what a crown is. You want them to associate what they're learning with things in the actual real world, right? Or a CDT code, you can show them an EOB with a CDT code. You want to make it so that the person starts to associate these things with real things, and they'll pick up the lingo pretty quick. Obviously, you're not going to have to do this, hopefully, with a provider, a hygienist, an assistant, etc. But one thing that you don't want to assume when you hire a dentist or a hygienist or whatever is just because they have a dental degree or they went to hygiene school that they know exactly how things are done in your practice. Sure, they are licensed to practice dentistry, and obviously if you're hiring an associate, you want to make sure that they're good at dentistry. You don't want to turn out bad work. But they don't know your procedure for doing an exam. They don't know your procedure for handling patients who have outstanding treatment. These are things that you're going to have to teach them. This is the case with every company. If I go into any company, let's say I'm an accountant, sure, I know how to do accounting, but that company is going to have their own procedures and ways of doing things. And even though they have the degree and the license to practice their profession, you still have to teach them how to do it in your practice. That's why, a few of our clients have done this, and I've always recommended this. You're always, at some point in your career, sometimes maybe several times a year, your hygienist is going to take time off, and you don't want to cancel the schedule, and you're going to bring in a temp. Well, part of the problem with bringing in a temp hygienist is they don't know where things are or how things work, or when they call the doctor for an exam, can they call them, the doctor's going to come whenever they're available, whatever, right? So you should have a temp hygienist little, write-up or a manual. So if I'm bringing in a temp, and let's say patients start at 8 o'clock, I'm going to have them meet me at 7:15 or 7:30 to go over where everything is and the various procedures in the practice so that they integrate well and we don't have a huge drop-off because, the hygienist took a day off. And funny thing about this, being that hygienists are always in demand, I've seen this work out really to clients' advantage in that they have it so together when they bring a temp in. The temp is so impressed that when they're actually looking for full-time work, or maybe they are looking for full-time work, they don't want a temp anymore, that office is one of the first ones that they call because that office had it so together. All right, so assuming you're training, what are the 5 big mistakes I'm referring to? Okay, well, mistake number 1 is having 0 training materials. In this day and age, there is 0 excuse, I know I used 0 twice there, for having no materials to train. And, look, everybody has some form of manuals. Maybe you've bought manuals at some point in time or another, and they need to be customized, and you haven't customized them. Or you have a manual that was customized 6 years ago, but everything's changed, and you've switched software, so it's no longer applicable. And, when you have somebody read it, they don't know quite what they're reading. In this day and age, there's really no excuse to have nothing. You have video capability. I mean, you can literally video pretty much anything these days with a phone at a the camera on an iPhone these days would have been unthinkable for a phone 20 years ago. So my point being is you could get a tripod, an iPhone, and a little Bluetooth mic off Amazon. The iPhone you wouldn't get from Amazon, but you get the tripod for $30, and you get a little Bluetooth mic for 30, maybe $50 if you really want to splurge, and you can record, incredible quality video. There's absolutely no reason not to have anything for somebody. I mean, I don't care if you're hiring a new person and you have nothing in writing at all, if you just videoed what you wanted them to do, or a brief write-up of some kind. Training materials, this is a case where this is always applicable. Having something is absolutely better than having nothing. And now, back in episode 154, I talked about using AI to help with your training materials. And the response to that one when it went on social media was pretty crazy. A lot of random people thought I was talking about using AI to replace dental staff, which really had nothing to do with the episode. The whole idea was you could record a transcript of how you want a certain policy in your office. Like, these are the payment policies in my practice. A person pays in full and they can save this much if they prepay. They could pay half down and blah. You just explain what it is. You feed it into something like ChatGPT. You give it general parameters for how you want your policies written, and it'll spit out a policy you could hand to somebody. That was what I meant by using AI. I don't want to replace dental employees with AI. But the point being is it's never been easier to generate training materials, okay? So if you're going to have a new hire, but then part of what will happen is, since you have nothing and you just write up this little janky job description, or your policies aren't well written, you start to feel bad about yourself. That's better than having nothing, okay? That is literally better than having nothing. So, and the beauty of it is, if you make some now and, you write one policy a week, write one policy a month for all I care. After 5 years, you have 60 policies. It really is not that big of a deal because, we do a lot of, obviously we're a training company. We have an online platform, DDS Success, which you may or may not have heard of. I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. There's my shameless plug of the episode. But on DDS Success, we have positional training, treatment coordinator, scheduler, etc. And that can get somebody about 85% to 90% of the way there. The only thing it's not going to do is how it applies to your practice. So in our scheduling video, for example, it explained how to build a dental schedule. What are the procedures? How do you handle cancellations and no-shows? Things like this. But it doesn't have your office hours or any peculiarities that are specifically applicable to your office. So look, I don't care. Someone could make a manual with just the specifics of your practice and then have them watch the DDS Success video on how to do scheduling. And that's training. That, again, is better than having zero training, and it doesn't have to be this big, beautiful, humongous manual. And I would, just as a matter of course, as you're hiring new employees for now, I would, give them something. If you have nothing, job description, basic overview of the job. Well, but then you're going to have to train this person, right? So let's say your office manager is doing it. And you might have some video training. Again, you can check out DDS Success, but let's say you're training them on things in your practice specifically, record it on video. Give each of them a microphone. You might have to talk to your attorney if the new staff member has to sign something about their being recorded or whatever. I don't know. But record it on video. And then you can do several things with that video. Number one, if you lose this person, you can show that video to the new applicant or the new hire, and they can watch, so the office manager isn't doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, right? That's one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is there's numerous platforms. I talked about some of them in that AI episode, 154, that you can use to transcribe this video. You take the transcript, you drop it into ChatGPT, and it cranks out policies for you. So the person can read a policy, watch a video. This is how you get something in order to train people with, okay? This was one of the reasons we did an online platform like DDS Success, was so that I could record, a course on communication or record a course on finance, and someone could just watch it. And I don't have to do it over and over and over again. I still do a lot of live seminars, but it's great. It's kept. It's memorialized. I can always update it. If I want to, there are things that have changed and I want to add supplemental lessons to that course, I can. You can do the same thing. And you can either get a cheap LMS for your practice, learning management system for your practice. The subscriptions to these can be very cheap. or at least have some secure place to store your videos on a cloud drive, a Google Drive or your OneDrive if you use Microsoft software. You don't want these things to go away, and you want them to be findable and organized so that you can use them in your training. So that's like mistake number one, having nothing to train the person with. Mistake number two is having no sequence of training. So I want you to imagine for a second if on day 2 of dental school you were in clinic and you were told to do a crown prep. I mean, that wouldn't work, right? If I was training public speakers and on day 2 of the, 6-month course, I put them on stage in front of 3,000 people, that would be just plain mean. There's sort of a sequence of training, a pyramid of training. Training builds on other training. So with any position you're training for, you have to look at where would you start. And the smart thing is to start with the easy stuff. If you look at any position, it has all these functions. There are varying degrees of difficulty of all of these functions. So let's take a treatment coordinator, for instance. Well, what would be the easiest things for a treatment coordinator to do? Maybe calling the incomplete treatment list and scheduling people, if they need a hygiene visit, to come in for hygiene. Or if they need a consult, scheduling them to come in and see the doctor. That might not be difficult. So think with this for a second. You're an office manager. You have this person. You're trying to get them up and running as a treatment coordinator. You need some help. You want to expand on what you're doing so you're not doing this position forever. Well, you go, good, here's the incomplete treatment list. Here's the list of people that are overdue for hygiene. I want you to call those people in to get them back on the hygiene schedule, because then when they're in on the hygiene schedule, the doc can talk to them again about their incomplete treatment. Okay, you start there, because scheduling hygiene appointments is not difficult. You could do the same thing with a scheduler for that matter. If you're training someone to schedule, have them call hygiene appointments first. There's not a lot of variance with hygiene appointments. And if I were to ask anybody how long does it take to actually train somebody to schedule someone for hygiene, I mean, it's not long. Check their age, make sure they're not 3 years old. It's not like you're calling the kid instead of the parent. See when the last time they were in was, so you know whether they're going to need a new initial or not, so you know how long to schedule them for. There's not a lot to this, right? Especially if you're calling overdue patients. So start there. Start with something simple. And that accomplishes a couple of things for you. If I put someone on the phone calling hygiene appointments as an example, that's pretty simple. If someone can't do that with minimal training, they're probably not going to work out. That's just my thought. So why would I then invest more and more time training this person if they can't schedule people for hygiene appointments, right? I wouldn't give them really complex tasks. I just want to see, can this person produce anything? Can they get a product? If they can, and it's, I'm not going to expect them to be like my dental assistant who's been with me for 20 years and it could schedule hygiene in their sleep while they're, if they make hygiene calls once in a while because they know all the patients. But I expect to see something of, some degree of productivity from them, which would then justify embarking on more training with them. All right. So pick the easiest parts of the position and have them start with the easy stuff. And as a side note with this, and I'm going to say it again, I've said it on the podcast numerous times, this is where a lot of practices go wrong. If you hire a new administrative staff member and they're going to be, they can be at the front desk, what's the first thing people train them to do? Usually in the average practice, what do you think it is? If you said answer the phones, you are correct. That is a terrible idea to have a brand new person answering the phones for a number of reasons. Number one, that's the first point of contact in your practice with new patients as well as patients of record. Especially if a patient of record calls and the person answering the phone has no clue who they are, they sound like they're all thumbs, they're going to wonder what's going on. Think about a business where you've dealt with that business for a long time, you have a really good rapport with the people at the front, the administrative people, and then you call and somebody acts like they have no idea which way is up. That's a bit alarming to you as a customer. Well, imagine how a new patient's going to react to that, especially if the person's having to be put on hold continuously because the person they're calling doesn't know what they're doing. Sure, maybe they answered the phone correctly. They said, it's a great day at ABC Dental. My name is Bill. I can help you. But it really doesn't reflect well on the business. I would not let somebody loose on my phones unless they really knew the practice and knew their stuff. Because also, if you're the average dental practice, you're spending money on marketing. And that's where my marketing's going. It's people calling the practice. And if you wonder why your new patient conversion is low, that might be why. Anyway, just as a complete aside. So you want to have your training sequence so they get the easy stuff. You can see if they can get a product on the easy stuff. But then also what's kind of cool is it gives them some wins. It shows, I can do this. Especially imagine somebody with zero dental experience. They walk into a dental practice, there's all this new terminology. You're training them on dental terminology, and I wouldn't do that as a full-time thing, like go learn dental terminology full-time. Maybe they spend an hour or two a day doing it, but then the rest of the day, they're on the phone calling overdue hygiene patients because you train them to do that in, a couple hours. They really know how to do it. So then they start calling and scheduling and helping fill up the hygiene schedule. Well, they're doing a good job. They're going to have wins. That's going to make them more excited about learning more and getting more into whatever job it is that you hired them for. It actually also provides something of value to the business. It provides relief for the rest of the staff because someone else is helping pull the weight. So give them the easy stuff first and then work their way up into the more complex stuff as you train them and get them working. Which brings us into mistake number 3, having to do with training, is having the person just go read stuff, okay? The manual in the break room. Here's the manual for the scheduling position. Go to the break room and read it. And it's 120 pages. They come back, did you read the manual? Okay, good. Here's your desk. Bad idea. You want them to associate whatever they're reading, and this is why, how are our courses built here at MGE? It's interesting. If you do a course at MGE, even in our seminars, we'll go over a subject, and then the person has to practice it in different ways. Maybe they're given essay questions. Why do you think this is that way? So the person starts consulting their understanding of the subject, or they're doing exercises, they're role playing, or they're going out and practicing it in the real world so they can take what's on the written page and they're going out and actually having to do something with it. So if you're going to give a person a manual to read, you want to sandwich that with some actual doingness, I guess is the point. They've just read how to schedule an appointment. Maybe then they have a demo version of the software, or they have a read-only access to the software, and they can actually play around with it and see how it works, right? And you might want to even build in as part of your training after they've read it, now they do it in front of you, okay? So it can't just be reading only. It can't be reading only. On the MGE Power Program, here it comes, second shameless plug, it's 78 days of training, 600 hours of training. It's, 22 courses and, probably 6 or 7 different seminars, right? It's a lot of training. But that training all has materials. There's course manuals and seminar manuals. It's sort of the difference like this. If you said to me, hey, Jeff, I want to do the MGE Power Program, and I sent you a stack of books and said, here you go, get trained. That isn't training. That's why you come to our course room. The idea is we're making sure you're getting it and using it and able to actually do it as you're learning it. You can get your questions answered, things like this. So you can't just have training that consists of just reading stuff. That does not work. They have to actually do something to make sure that they can actually do it or perform that action, right? So how do you counter that is with drilling, or exercises. So for example, let's say you had me read the script on how you want the phone answered in your practice. I sit and I read it. So what should you do with me next? We'd role play it. And we'd first make sure, again, because we're sequencing this, right, that I got that script down exactly the way as written. I don't alter it, I don't screw it up, etc. And I could do it in my sleep. I don't have to have the paper in front of me anymore when I do it. All right. Now we're going to give me different types of phone calls, assuming you've given me some training on how you want different types of phone calls handled, right? So if someone's calling from a stock brokerage for the doctor, I'm supposed to go interrupt them in the middle of a root canal. Now, I'm supposed to take a message. How am I supposed to take a message? You would drill me on each of these things over and over and over and over again until I had it cold. How about a new patient intake form? Someone calls in, like you have an employee and they've done a good job. Now you want them handling the phones or you want them handling new patient calls. Well, then you better run me through the intake form a number of different times, starting off with simple scenarios, then give me more complex scenarios until I can think with it. That's the whole idea before you actually let me loose and get going on it. Which brings me to mistake number 4, which has to do with exactly what I'm just talking about, is, not just book reading was 3. The other one is not enough drilling. Not enough drilling. People's concept of how much they should drill or role play with an employee is usually lacking. I had a client whose associate had difficulty building rapport and meeting new patients. They just had a problem with it. They were fairly introverted. So what did that client do? They role played with that associate for an hour. for a full hour. You know, I'm going to be the new patient, associate with the doctor. Okay, good. Meet me for the first time. And they started off easy. And they became more and more difficult. You know, maybe it was a more ornery new patient until that associate felt completely comfortable doing it. And you should do this, especially with actions that require, personal, I was going to use the word interface, but like interpersonal relations where you have one person dealing with another person. But you can even do it if, you have someone calling and following up on insurance claims. How do you handle the insurance company? Okay, ask for a supervisor. You want to drill this over and over and over again. And guess what, folks? I would film this drill or these drills because there's a lot of great information, especially if, let's say, the person that's training the new receptionist or they've been with your practice for a bit on how to handle a new patient call is the person who's currently handling them and they're really good at it. Well, you're getting all this incredible, valuable information with all these different scenarios. Do you take my PPO? How much do you charge for a crown? You're watching them handle it expertly and teaching this other person, and then you're watching the other person drill it. I would have that all on camera, because then I can use that to generate more training materials or show other staff so they can see how it's done and then have them drill. So the idea is you want to drill somebody to the point where they know it cold, and they don't have to think. A lot of practices, as an example, want to get more referrals. So what'll happen, you'll start this new referral program where you'll have staff meeting and you tell the staff, hey, I want to start asking patients for more referrals. We have a lot of happy patients. So start asking for more referrals this week. And then nobody asks anything. Well, if you drilled the team on how to do it, maybe they feel uncomfortable about it. And you'll find out. You could do this in a staff meeting without calling anybody out. You should make it fun. Like, okay, cool. So I'm a patient. You talk to your dental assistant. How would you ask me for a referral? And you watch. They're blushing. They feel uncomfortable. I couldn't possibly ask that patient. Okay, well, here's how I would do it. Okay, now you do it. Until the point they don't feel embarrassed. They don't feel like they're being caught flat-footed. They feel like they can just do it cold. You'll find you'll get more referrals, okay? So that's mistake number 4, not enough drilling, okay? And you could apply this to anything. The bottom line and the most important thing is you want someone to not have to be able to think. They can just do it. So if I'm drilled properly at the front desk, I've got the new patient intake form down cold. Any type of new patient call comes in, I know exactly how you want it handled. All right. Which brings us to mistake number 5. You've trained the person, you've drilled the person, and now they're working, and you see they screwed up. So mistake number 5 is allowing screw-ups to continue without correcting them. Now, this goes back to what I started the episode with. In a lot of cases, if this person was a problem, was malicious, you would have probably, if you've done all this drilling with them I've discussed and training, you would have picked up on this by now. So let's assume that this person really wants to do a good job, but they messed up. They muffed that new patient call. You're listening to your incoming calls, and you see, wow, they really screwed this one up. So what do? Should you get mad? I mean, I wouldn't. I would sit down with them and go, hey, what happened here? Do you see you were supposed to do X and instead you did Y? What happened? Well, I didn't know. Something. You're going to find what you find out what went wrong, and you clean it up and you drill it again and again and again and again. Maybe it was a scenario you never covered before, in which case you better figure out how to handle that one and drill them on that. And then what's great is if this is a good team member, you won't find that mistake being perpetuated, okay? And that drilling handled it for them, and then they just, from then forward, they're fine. But that doesn't mean they're not going to screw up again in the future. We all screw up. But the idea is when you see those screw-ups, don't let them sit. Because especially if the person's messing up handling a particular type of new patient call, let's say they don't like shoppers for some reason, and they always screw up those calls and don't schedule the patient. Well, there's a good amount of shoppers that might call your practice. If they don't know what they're doing, you're losing all that potential opportunity. Get them trained on it. Get them able to actually handle it. And like I said, record everything. Record. Keep it in a centralized place. You can crank manuals out of that. There's stuff for your staff to watch and things like this. So those are the 5 big mistakes that I get made. Sure, there's other mistakes, but these are pretty simple, and they're actually very, very easy to handle. The last thing I'll comment on this is look, if I'm training somebody, I'm going to sort of have a baseline as to how long it should take me to train somebody. not the superstar employee, but the average person. So I've hired somebody new and I've got them, let's say I've started them out making reactivation calls as an example, and they're going to be my receptionist or whatever. Well, I've done this before, or I have a general idea of how it would work if I train somebody to do it. And I see that, they've been on the phone now for 2 weeks or a week and they haven't made an appointment yet. And I've been spending time with them every day. That's probably not going to work. Right? There comes a point where, not everybody's a good fit for your practice. There comes a point where you get into the law of diminishing returns, so to speak, where it's just you're wasting too much time on this. You need to get another candidate who is more better at learning or better at practicing what they're learning. But you should have a baseline for this, because you also don't want to go the other way where you spent 5 minutes with the person and they're not producing and now you get rid of them and you waste someone who could have been a good staff member. So you have to generally develop a baseline of how long it should take to train the average person to do various tasks in the practice, and then you'll get a good idea whether somebody is a good fit or not. Anyway, some basic stuff there, but I do hope that it helps. I'll put the links to DDS Success and the MGE Power Program, my shameless plugs of the episode, on the episode webpage. If you want to know more about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you the next episode.